They became an independent country in 1992. This is 1997. I have to persuade them to go use their archive. Why? They were afraid. You go starting asking questions about records in the archives, and guess what? You get your name on a list. Why do you want to know? And of course, the National Archives, they were literally in the 15th century. Instead of using folders like we use, they were actually sewing the records together in the folder with needles and string. And they had 4 people verifying that there were 10 pieces of paper in that folder. They each had a stamp. The stamps over each other to make sure it's authentic, because they trust no one. When I told them we just slip things in a folder and put it in a drawer and give it to a researcher, they thought I was a lunatic. How can you possibly trust people? They're going to steal all that stuff. So we have, in our democratic tradition, something that is very important. And the only reason it works is because people like you pay attention to what is happening. So access to public records, I told Frank that we didn't get our budget cut. However, you realize if people don't have access to records, government runs on records. Everybody is doing records to make it fair, to make it equal, to make it transparent. Without records, none of that happens. So the last thing I want to show you is, this is a record. I want to show you something about resistance to change in our society. How many of you have heard of Thomas Edison? Okay? Thomas Edison, this is what is called an Edison cylinder. Thomas Edison invented the Edison cylinder in 1877. And you know what people poke fun at? What's the purpose of this thing? That's crazy. There's no purpose. No, that will never be used. You know, that's stupid. In 1878, he wrote an article explaining the future uses of the phonograph. And this Edison cylinder is a piece of wax. It's fragile. They break. But it's a piece of wax with a needle recording sound on it. And you know one of the things that Thomas Edison said in 1878 to show you how radical we changed? He said, these cylinders will replace stenographers because they're much more accurate than any stenographer. Last week, I visited the Business Professions Division of the Department of Licensing to collect records on the test for stenographers in 2009. So we've taken a century. We're considering, we're slowing it down. We may eliminate stenographers and their skills in another 50 years or so. So Tim talked about punch cards. We have them. How many of you have these sitting around the house? How many of you have these antiques? Yeah, these are so old that almost everybody in here, I can look around and tell you, you can all remember these. This is the 1980s. Yet, if I gave you this and you took it home to put it in your computer, this is why they call it floppy disk. You know, in those days, they did really flop. How do you keep the information alive on these things? Paper rots, these rot, these change. How about your CDs? Oh, they'll last forever. Don't worry about them. We say their life is 1 year. They have CD rot. They're not dependable. Most technology is not. So that's why we have a digital archive. Washington is the only state in the Union to have a digital archive that stores electronic records and makes sure that they're not lost by keeping them on some disk, that they're not tampered with, that they're not changed, so that in 100 years or 200 years, you will still be able to have access to your electronic records. And the best thing about them, you can have access to them from home. 50,000 retrievals a month from the digital archives alone. So you need to be proud of Washington, and it's real difficult to have a democracy without having access to public records. So you need to pat yourselves on the back for showing up here and caring and being true revolutionaries. Thank you.
Talk about a guy who would make you feel guilty. I just destroyed, what, $10,000 worth of valuable records here. I worked my way through college at an insurance company as a mail clerk. Yeah, we used to take these wax dictaphone records, just these round things, and I'd put them on a device and shave them down so they could be reused. I destroyed records. I'm guilty. Okay. Yeah. Our next guest, by the way, be casual, the restrooms are out there. We're not going to stop. We have another presenter, and then we'll get into the Q&A. This next person I met a lot of years ago, and you know, he's a rather ominous figure in person. He certainly was back, what, 25 or 30 years ago. I scared the hell out of me. But I would go to the PUD meetings probably too frequently. I went to all of them. And we covered our county PUD, mostly because it didn't do anything. Our county PUD, up until recent history, if we want to call it that, really was a group of men, usually. I think they were always men, sitting on this 3-member board, and they'd think about what they were going to do. And then they'd rethink about what they were going to do. And then they would think about it again and have another study done. Each time they had a study, that justified being able to tax the people of Fort Townsend. Went that way for a lot of years, through a lot of commissioners, and it was kind of fun covering it because they didn't do anything. And it was fun to write about it. Then Wayne King and a few of his cronies, he wasn't the leader of this group, but he was with them. A few of his cronies came and they sat with me at these meetings, and I couldn't figure out why. Until a moment later, when they were anxious to see the PUD start to function. Start to function with such unique activities as taking over, developing and maintaining public water system.